Chris, no, don't.
Dad, don't! Please!
In the near future, Los Angeles is drowning in crime. Homelessness and unemployment have reached terrifying levels, and the city has become a breeding ground for violence. Prisons are so overcrowded that authorities create massive red zones across the city to contain criminal activity. Thousands of police officers lose their lives trying to control the chaos, desperate for a solution. The Department of Justice launches a controversial new system called the Mercy Court. This system replaces traditional trials with artificial intelligence. Instead of months or years in court, the AI reviews evidence and delivers a verdict within hours after a murder occurs. In this courtroom, suspects are considered guilty unless they can prove otherwise. Within just 2 years of its launch, the Mercy Court has already convicted and executed 18 people. And the city's crime rate drops by an incredible 68%. Detective Chris Raven, a member of the LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division, suddenly wakes up in the Mercy Court chamber. Judge Maddox appears before him and calmly announces that she will oversee his trial. Chris is confused and panicked. He tries to explain that he is a police detective, but Maddox simply tells him to calm down and breathe. Chris protests, pointing out that he has sent criminals to the very execution chair he is now sitting in. Maddox informs him that his blood alcohol level has finally dropped to an acceptable level, meaning the trial can now begin. Still confused, Chris demands to know why he is there. Maddox finally reveals the shocking truth. He is being tried for the murder of his own wife, Nicole Raven. She immediately opens the police evidence file and plays body camera footage from the crime scene. In the video, an officer rushes into the kitchen where Chris's daughter, Britt, is crying next to Nicole's body. The officer asks the dying woman who stabbed her. With her last breath, Nicole whispers a single word. Chris Maddox explains that the court will now present its opening statement. Chris had been the only person in the house with Nicole when she was stabbed. Chris angrily claims the accusation is a lie. Maddox calmly suggests that he verified the information himself. She activates voice commands and touch-sensitive controls so he can access the system. When Chris searches for Nicole Raven, he finds a news report about his own arrest. The reporter also mentions that Chris and his partner, Jock Dio, had supported the Mercy Court program from the beginning, and that Chris himself had brought the first participant, David Webb, to the system 2 years earlier. Maddox then calculates Chris's probability of guilt at 97.5%. which is far above the 80% threshold required to start a Mercy trial. She opens access to the municipal cloud, a massive network where every citizen and organization is legally required to connect their devices. During the trial, Maddox will have full access to this cloud, but Chris is also allowed to search it to prove his innocence. However, the stakes are terrifying. If he is found guilty, he will be executed in 90 minutes by a deadly sonic pulse. The trial begins immediately. Chris panics, but Maddox explains that if he can lower his guilt probability from 97.5% down to the 92% reasonable doubt threshold, he will survive. She begins reviewing Chris's actions earlier that morning. According to the data, Chris arrived at work at 8:51 a.m., but instead of entering the building, he turned around and drove back home. A doorbell camera shows him asking Nicole to open the door. Nicole refuses, saying she is finished with him and that he can speak to her through a lawyer. Chris then unlocks the door himself and enters the house, where Nicole begins shouting at him. Chris remains inside for 26 minutes. Soon after he leaves, Britt returns home from a sleepover and discovers Nicole's body. Crime Scene analysis shows that Nicole was stabbed during the exact period Chris was inside the house. The wound was inflicted by a right-handed attacker and was so severe that it ruptured her liver. Chris insists he didn't do it, but Maddox reminds him that he is right-handed and that Nicole's blood was found on his shirt. She continues, reviewing the timeline. After leaving the house, Chris apparently went straight to a bar and drank heavily. Chris denies ever going to a bar, but Maddox shows surveillance footage. In the video, police officers attempt to arrest him. He resists briefly before they manage to handcuff him. Maddox suggests that the alcohol he drank and the blow to his head during the arrest might have caused him to forget both the bar and possibly even killing his wife. Chris remains silent. She then asks why he returned home that morning. Chris admits that he can't remember. Overwhelmed, he begins to cry. Maddox asks whether he and Nicole had argued about his drinking problem or about their daughter. Chris asks if he can talk to Britt. Maddox explains that Britt is currently staying with Nicole's parents, but she agrees to send a request for contact. Court protocol also allows Chris to contact a personal sponsor. He chooses Rob Nelson, who answers the call. Rob has been Chris's sponsor for 2 years and works at Viking Shipping, the same company where Nicole worked. Rob says everyone at the company is shocked by Nicole's death. Chris admits he can't remember what happened. Rob sighs and says Chris should have called him if he felt the urge to drink again. Chris insists he didn't kill Nicole, but before he can continue, Maddox abruptly ends the call. She explains that the call was meant to address Chris's relapse, and he failed to use the support offered. Chris argues that Rob knows how happy his marriage was. Maddox smiles slightly and says she is already aware of the true state of his relationship. She plays a series of videos from their past. Chris and Nicole dated for 3 years before getting married. A year later, their daughter Britt was born. For several years, their life seemed stable and happy. But everything changed after a traumatic incident on duty in which Chris's partner, Ray, was killed. Over the past 6 months, Nicole had sent 57 messages to friends and family describing Chris's worsening temper. Combined with his growing drinking problem, Maddox concludes that Nicole had likely been considering divorce. Another video appears. In it, Britt secretly tells her boyfriend that her father has become genuinely frightening and that her mother often lies in bed crying. The boyfriend offers to pick her up. Suddenly, a door slams somewhere in the house. Britt says it might be her dad, and the video ends. Chris is confused because he and Nicole monitored Britt's Instagram and never saw that clip. Maddox explains that Britt actually maintains 2 accounts, one hidden from her parents. Another video plays. After speaking to her boyfriend, Britt tells her followers that her house might even be haunted. At that moment, Britt accepts Chris's call. She is crying and says her mother is dead. Chris gently tries to comfort her. Britt then asks why he was sent to Mercy Court if he had supposedly been at work during the murder. Chris insists it's all a misunderstanding. She says her grandfather Jeff told her that no one receives a mercy trial unless they are guilty. Chris urges her not to listen to him. Suddenly, Jeff appears and ends the call. Chris angrily tells Maddox that Jeff has always tried to turn Britt against him and never believed he was good enough for Nicole. Maddox simply reminds him that the clock is running and he should focus on proving his innocence. Chris explodes in frustration, accusing the mercy system of deciding people's fate before they even sit in the chair. Maddox calmly responds that anger will not help him. Chris says he has every right to be angry because he has lost his wife and his daughter is now alone. He asks whether she understands that pain. Maddox replies that she was not designed to feel emotions, only to analyze facts. If Chris is innocent, he must prove it. Otherwise, Britt will lose both of her parents today. Taking a deep breath, Chris asks to contact his partner Jack. Maddox allows it, explaining that he can reach anyone who might provide evidence or testify about his character. The call connects and Jack appears on screen, immediately telling him he is in serious trouble. Chris insists he didn't kill Nicole. Looking at a drone camera view of his house, he asks Jack to walk through the crime scene with him. Maddox provides detailed crime scene scans and projects a virtual reconstruction of the kitchen. Jack notices a broken vase and suggests Nicole might have tried to defend herself by swinging it at her attacker. When Jack enters the kitchen area, Chris asks about the footprints on the floor. Maddox explains they belong to Britt. Jack suggests there must have been a struggle. Chris asks Maddox to zoom in on the countertop. Jack theorizes that Nicole may have thrown a plate at the attacker while backing away. Forcing the killer to grab the nearest knife, Chris asks about the fingerprints on the knife. Maddox confirms they belong to him. Chris explains that Nicole was always afraid of knives, so he usually handled the cooking and cutting in the kitchen. Fiber evidence also points to him, which Maddox notes is not surprising since he lived in the house. Jack reluctantly concludes that the scene looks like a crime of passion, and all evidence points to Chris. Chris then asks Maddox to show Nicole's phone records. A virtual version of her phone appears. Maddox analyzes the call history. 33% of her calls were with Chris, 26% with Britt, 10% with her parents, and the rest with friends and colleagues from Viking Shipping. Suddenly, Chris remembers seeing Nicole texting someone during an argument a week earlier. He asks Maddox to search through Britt's videos because she often recorded their arguments. Maddox scans the footage but cannot find the number Nicole was texting. Chris then asks if Nicole had a second phone for work. Maddox says there is no record of one. Just then, an officer informs Jack that they have found another phone inside Nicole's car. Maddox instructs Jack to enable Bluetooth and hold the device near her phone so the system can scan it. Moments later, Maddox confirms that it is not a work phone, but an unregistered burner phone not connected to the municipal cloud. The device contains only one number in its call history, and that number also belongs to another burner phone. Maddox calls the number, but the person on the other end immediately hangs up after hearing that the call is from Mercy Capitol Court. She tracks the signal and discovers that it is coming from the Hollywood Red Zone. Jack immediately drives there. Chris's guilt probability drops slightly as new evidence emerges. After another scan, Maddox pinpoints the signal inside the Hudson Hotel, where the suspect appears to be trying to escape through a back door. Jack soon spots a man who runs the moment he sees her. Maddox identifies him as Patrick, a chef working at the hotel. Chris asks whether this discovery lowers his guilt rate, but to his shock, it remains unchanged. Maddox calmly explains that guilty people run, but frightened people run as well. Jack eventually catches Patrick. He insists he has done nothing wrong and says he panicked when he received a call from Mercy Court. After checking the news and seeing that Nicole had died, he ran because he feared being blamed. Chris bitterly mocks him, wondering what Nicole could have possibly seen in someone like him. Patrick snaps back that he gave Nicole everything Chris never could. Maddox interrupts and asks Patrick how he knows Nicole. Patrick explains that he met her at a farmer's market, and afterward they began meeting regularly at the Hudson Hotel. When Chris asks about the burner phones, Patrick admits that Nicole wanted to communicate privately, so he bought one for her. Maddox confirms that Patrick owned both a personal phone and the burner device. She then checks the hotel's security cameras and rewinds to the time when Nicole was killed. The footage clearly shows Patrick working in the kitchen at that exact moment. Chris quietly realizes that Patrick cannot be the killer. Patrick looks at Chris and tells him that all Nicole ever wanted was someone who would actually listen to her. Jack then arrests Patrick for resisting earlier. Maddox informs Chris that his guilt probability has now increased, because instead of finding the real killer, he has just revealed a stronger motive for why he might have murdered his wife. She then asks him a chilling question. Does he truly believe he will find evidence to clear his name? Or did he simply want to confront the man who had been sleeping with his wife? Chris looks at Maddox and dryly asks if she truly believes he killed Nicole after learning about Patrick. Maddox responds sharply, pointing out that Chris clearly isn't telling the whole story. She notes how quickly he assumed Nicole was having an affair, suggesting he must have already suspected something. Chris admits he isn't shocked about Patrick. He confesses that lately he had been failing his wife in many ways. Even earlier that morning, Nicole had discovered the stash of alcohol he kept hidden in his car. Maddox asks when he started drinking again. Chris quietly admits it began about a year ago. In the footage that follows, Nicole confronts him about his drinking. Chris sighs and explains that he has struggled with alcoholism for most of his life, though after marrying Nicole, he managed to stay sober for years. Everyone was proud of him until the day his partner Ray died. Another video plays. Chris is briefing fellow officers about an SUV connected to a hit-and-run case. The vehicle belongs to a suspect named Alex. As Chris prepares to investigate, Nicole calls him. Ray offers to check the vehicle himself instead. Moments later, Ray is shot. Chris desperately rushes him to the hospital, begging him to stay awake. But Ray dies on the way. Later, Chris tracks the suspect down at the beach, but Alex is never convicted. Chris admits that he should have killed Alex when he had the chance, and that regret has haunted him ever since. He then reveals what happened earlier that morning. When he arrived at work, he reached for the bottle he had hidden in his car, but it was gone. He assumed Nicole had found it. Furious, he drove home and confronted her. They argued because she had thrown the bottle away. In anger, Chris smashed Nicole's favorite vase. A piece of broken glass flew up and cut her arm. Chris says he tried to clean the blood, which explains why Nicole's blood was found on his shirt. Maddox asks why he never mentioned this before. Chris admits the truth made him look guilty. He still can't remember what happened after that moment. Chris then says that if Nicole was upset enough to confide in Patrick, it proves how badly he had been behaving. In his rage, he fears he might have grabbed a knife without remembering it. Maddox interrupts him immediately, warning that if he confesses to murder, she will lock in the verdict, and all he will have to do is wait for his execution. Chris takes a breath and instead asks Maddox to show him everyone Nicole communicated with regularly. A list appears on the screen. He asks her to separate the names into friends and co-workers. Chris admits Patrick might be right. If he had been closer to Nicole, he would have known more about what was happening in her life. He asks to speak with Patrick again. Maddox informs him Patrick is being processed at a nearby police station but agrees to connect the call. When Patrick appears on screen, Chris asks whether Nicole had been facing any serious problems. Patrick shakes his head and says Nicole mostly complained that Chris wasn't spending enough time with her or with Britt. Then Chris asks whether she had trouble at work. That question triggers Patrick's memory. He recalls Nicole mentioning an issue at her company. Someone had been stealing chemicals from the business. After a customer reported missing materials from a shipment, Nicole's boss asked her to investigate the situation. She didn't like digging into coworkers' business, but she had begun looking into it anyway. Chris shifts his attention to Nicole's colleagues. Maddox checks their locations and explains that all of them are currently at work and none of them have been near Chris's neighborhood since Sunday. Chris nods slowly and realizes that Sunday was the day they held a barbecue at their house. Chris contacts Jack and tells her he has a hunch. He asks her to check the Viking Shipping depot. Maddox asks what he means by a hunch. Chris explains that sometimes you have to trust instinct, something the mercy court system might benefit from. Maddox reminds him that the court deals only with facts, but Chris argues that truth is rarely so simple. He asks Maddox whether Britt recorded anything during the barbecue. They review her footage together. Chris wonders if the killer might have used the party as an opportunity to scout the house. Maddox checks nearby street cameras. Out of the 46 cars that drove past the house that morning, none stopped Chris. Then asks about the streets behind the house. Someone could have climbed over the back fence. That thought reminds him of their neighbor Bill, who lives behind them and has a wildlife camera set up in his yard. Maddox attempts to access the footage but encounters an error. Because the files are still being archived after an internet outage in the area, Chris continues thinking. The barbecue started at 2 p.m. on Sunday. He asks Maddox how many employees from Viking Shipping arrived in their own vehicles. She replies that 4 vehicles were recorded. She tracks Rob's car entering the street at 2:30 p.m., but Chris notices something interesting. Rob wasn't alone. There were 3 passengers with him. Chris asks Maddox to connect him with Rob. During the call, Chris asks Rob about the coworkers he drove to the barbecue. Rob lists their names: Carla, Marie, and Leo. Chris then asks whether everyone left together afterward. Rob explains there wasn't any clear plan. Later in the evening, he drove Deborah and Bill home, while the others arranged their own rides. Chris then asks if anyone missed work the next day. Rob says no. Chris asks Maddox to replay one of Britt's Instagram videos, the one where she says she thinks her dad just came home. Maddox shows the timestamp. Chris checks the department logs, which prove that he was still at the precinct at the moment the video was recorded. Finally, Chris asks Maddox to connect him with Britt again. When she appears on screen, she is furious and calls him a liar. She shows him a YouTube video someone uploaded of Chris drunk in a bar while he was supposed to be working. Britt hadn't known he started drinking again and asks if that's why he has been acting so badly for the past year. Then she asks him directly if he killed her mother. Chris swears he didn't. As Britt tries to end the call, Maddox speaks to her calmly, explaining that her father is trying to prove his innocence and her help might matter. But Britt still believes he's guilty. Chris changes the subject gently and asks about the video she posted the night before the murder. Britt snaps at him, accusing him of spying on her private account, but Chris apologizes. She explains that she heard what sounded like a door closing somewhere in the house that night. She checked around, but didn't find anything strange. Soon after, a friend picked her up for a sleepover. Chris asks Maddox to replay the clip. As he studies the video carefully, he notices that the basement door is slightly open. He asks Britt if she opened it. She says no. Maddox enhances the image and confirms the door had been moved. Suddenly, Chris realizes something terrifying. The killer may not have entered the house that morning at all. Instead, the person could have hidden inside the house during the barbecue on Sunday and stayed there until Tuesday. Waiting for the right moment to kill Nicole, Chris promises to explain everything later and ends the call. He looks at the probability meter, but his guilt level hasn't changed. Maddox suggests the open door might just be a shadow. She also reminds him that he has ignored another important detail: the stolen chemicals from Viking Shipping. Chris immediately searches Nicole's email for anything related to missing stock. He keeps seeing the abbreviation UG. Maddox explains that it stands for urea grande, a chemical used in skincare products, but also in manufacturing methamphetamine. One name in the records catches Chris's attention. He asks Maddox how much of the chemical has gone missing. After analyzing the shipments, Maddox reports that every delivery to a company called BioBeauty has shown discrepancies for the past 6 months. Each delivery record lists an extra 50-kilogram container that doesn't actually exist. Chris realizes what's happening. On paper, the company appears to have more stock than it actually does, allowing someone to steal the real product from the shipments without being noticed. Maddox calculates that more than 300 kilograms of urea grande are missing. They search through employee emails and find a message sent on Friday requesting an urgent meeting with Nicole. Maddox pulls up security footage from the shipping depot. In the video, the employee Holt is seen arguing with Nicole. Chris then checks Holt's personal emails and financial records. He discovers that Holt has serious gambling debts. Then Chris notices something interesting. Rob transferred Holt $4,000 recently. Chris smiles as the pieces begin to fit together. Holt could have been stealing the chemicals to produce drugs and sell them to pay off his debts. When Nicole discovered the scheme, he might have killed her to keep the secret. Chris contacts Rob again, but this time Holt answers the call instead. Acting concerned, Holt asks if Chris is okay. Maddox tells him to put Rob on the phone. Holt nervously claims he just answered because he saw the call and says he will go look for Rob. Meanwhile, Maddox informs Chris that Jack is only 4 minutes away from Viking Shipping. Chris tells Maddox to keep tracking Holt's movements and asks her to show the bird camera footage from his neighbor's yard. In the footage, leaves begin rustling at 10:08 a.m. The camera activates again later at 11:43 a.m. Maddox tracks Bill's phone and confirms he left his house at 11:23 a.m. Though the surrounding cameras were affected by the earlier internet outage, Holt returns to the call claiming he can't find Rob. Chris loses patience and directly accuses him of murdering Nicole after she uncovered his chemical theft. Holt hesitates before insisting that Rob was actually the one stealing the chemicals. He says both he and Nicole discovered it, but decided not to report Rob because Rob had always helped them. Holt explains that Rob had financial problems but was also generous and had even loaned him money before. Chris demands to know where Rob is now. Holt says Rob left work early because he felt sick and had already called in sick the previous day. Holt also remembers something else. After the barbecue on Sunday, Rob stayed behind to speak privately with Nicole, promising that everything would be fine. He also asked Holt to borrow his car that evening so Rob could drive co-workers home. Maddox tracks Rob's car and discovers it parked at his house. Chris tells Jack to head there while Maddox alerts the SWAT team. Maddox then reviews archived traffic footage showing Bill Peterson's car arriving at the lot and Rob climbing out of the trunk. Chris's guilt level drops again. Chris urges Maddox to trust her instincts. Suddenly, the system glitches and briefly reboots. Meanwhile, SWAT officers arrive at Rob's house and break in, but Rob is gone. Maddox notes that the vehicle tracker still shows the car at the location. Chris realizes Rob must have removed the tracker and left it behind to mislead them. He tells Maddox to search traffic cameras for the truck Rob might be using. She finds no Viking license plate, suggesting Rob remove that as well. Inside Rob's house, officers find a torn photograph. Chris asks them to hold it closer so Maddox can scan it. While processing the image, Chris tells officers to search the garage. They discover burned papers that had been deliberately destroyed. Maddox also points out that Rob has the scientific knowledge to manufacture drugs himself. Then officers find containers of urea Grande, along with a truck license plate and physical maps. Chris realizes Rob had been operating completely offline, leaving no digital trace, something the Mercy Court system could never detect. Soon they uncover a manual explaining how to build explosive devices. Chris immediately warns the officers. Maddox scans traffic cameras again and finally locates Rob, driving a truck carrying nearly 3,000 pounds of explosives toward downtown. Facial recognition identifies someone sitting beside Rob in the truck, David Webb, the man Chris once sent to Mercy Court. Maddox soon discovers the shocking truth. David Webb is Rob's younger brother. They had been adopted separately, and Rob changed his last name later in life. Chris suddenly remembers meeting Rob at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Rob became his sponsor shortly after David's trial. Everything becomes clear. This was never about Nicole. It was about revenge against Chris and against the Mercy Court itself. Chris warns the authorities that the real target is the Mercy Court building. He tries to call Britt, but Jeff answers her phone. Chris quickly asks Maddox to check the doorbell camera. The footage reveals Rob speaking with Britt outside before forcibly kidnapping her. Chris orders Jack to pursue Rob immediately. At the same moment, officers discover a bomb inside the garage. They rush to evacuate, but the explosion goes off, killing several officers. Chris's guilt percentage finally drops to 0, but he refuses to end the trial. If the trial ends, he will lose access to the system's surveillance network that could help stop Rob. Maddox argues that the court process is already complete, but Chris insists they must stop Rob before he kills more people. Maddox hesitates and glitches again. She admits Chris's instincts may have been right and begins to question whether the system might have failed others before. Chris tells her he understands that feeling. He also failed people he loved. But now they have one chance to make things right. Police vehicles begin chasing Rob's truck. Maddox connects directly with the tactical response team. Their plan is to stop Rob at the far end of a bridge to minimize casualties and rescue Britt. The operation begins, but they cannot safely remove Britt from the truck. Jack, now leading the operation, makes a harsh decision. She orders the team to kill Rob before he reaches the city. Chris desperately begs them not to shoot because Britt is inside the truck. At the last moment, Maddox intervenes and stops the attack, saving Britt's life. She informs Chris that Rob is now only 3 minutes away from Mercy Court. She immediately orders an evacuation of the building. Chris asks to speak with Rob directly. Maddox instructs Jack to position a helicopter in front of the truck, then hacks into the vehicle's radio frequency and opens communication. Rob speaks first, telling Chris he recognized him the moment he walked into the AA meeting and that he has been dreaming about revenge for 2 years. Rob admits his brother had problems, but insists he could have helped him. Instead, Chris sent him to Mercy Court. Rob wanted Chris to sit in that chair, knowing he was innocent, just like his brother had. Chris argues that David Webb was a murderer. Rob angrily insists he wasn't. Suddenly, Jack opens fire on the truck. Chris yells at her to stop. Maddox overrides Jack's vehicle systems to prevent further shots. Rob crashes the truck straight through the entrance of Mercy Court. He jumps out and starts firing at the officers. Chris demands that Maddox release him from confinement. He takes an elevator to the lower level and grabs an officer's vest and radio so Maddox can keep communicating with him. Rob shouts for Chris to come out. Chris steps forward and asks him to release Britt. Rob refuses. He says everything ends here, with the court, the judge, and Chris. Maddox appears on a nearby screen and calmly addresses Rob. She tells him that if his brother was truly innocent, he should prove it. Rob begins explaining. His brother struggled with addiction, so Rob tried to help him by giving him money and a phone. Then suddenly David was accused of murdering a woman named Valerie. Rob insists it was impossible because he had been on the phone with David at the exact time of the murder. While Rob talks, Maddox quietly informs Chris that if he removes the battery from the detonator, there is an 82% chance the bomb will not explode. Meanwhile, Maddox reviews the official record. Valerie was found dead under an overpass at 6 a.m., but the estimated time of death was 10 p.m. the night before. David's fingerprints were found on the knife. Rob insists again that David couldn't have done it because he was on the phone with him at that exact time. Suddenly, Britt bites Rob's hand. Chris rushes forward and rips the detonator away from him. Chris raises his gun, but Britt begs him not to shoot. Rob, barely standing, insists he called the police station that night to confirm the call history. At that moment, Jack suddenly shoots Rob. Chris shouts at her to stop. With his final breath, Rob repeats that he called the precinct and spoke to a woman who promised to check the records. Maddox confirms that there was indeed an incoming call from Rob that night. Chris slowly turns to Jack. He reminds her that she was the officer responsible for processing David Webb's case. Maddox then tracks the location history of David's phone, which shows it first at the crime scene and later at the police station. Chris asks Maddox to bypass internal security using his credentials and pull Jack's Bota camera footage from the evidence room. The video plays. It shows Jack secretly removing David's phone from evidence and later throwing it away. Jack defends herself by saying the Mercy Court system was necessary. Crime rates dropped because of it, and sometimes sacrifices had to be made. Police officers move in and arrest both Rob and Jack. Maddox appears on the screen again and quietly asks Chris what they have done. Chris replies that whether human or artificial intelligence, everyone makes mistakes and sometimes lies. Maddox softly responds, "Yes, we do." Then the system shuts down. And that's a wrap on today's recap. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a plot twist. Got a movie you want recapped? Drop it in the comments below. This is DX Recap. See you in the next one.